If you think that the goal of a surveyor is to fail you, this video might change how you see the entire process for your survey. Okay? Most agencies don't fail because they're bad. They fail because they don't understand what a surveyor is actually looking for. So I'm going to give you 5 points on what you need to know when it's time. I help agencies with licensing and survey, and today I'm going to walk you through what surveyors are actually looking for when they walk into your agency. They're not looking for perfection, they're looking for consistency, documentation, and systems. In healthcare, we live by this rule: if it's not documented, it's not done. We can say all day that we did something. If there's no proof, you didn't do it, okay? So, the first point I want to talk to you about is policies that match your practice. Surveyors don't just ask for policies, they want to see if your policies actually match what you're doing. Example, if your policy says that orientation occurs on the first day, they're going to ask for proof. They want to know if on day one, when you hired the employee, orientation began. If you have discrepancies that somewhere along the lines where June 1st it was the orientation day, but you have June 3rd on your documentation, that kind of gives a blurred line, and that could be a reason for them citing your agency. Another example of what policy that you may have in place is that you do supervisory visits every 90 days, which is what is required in Illinois. And they want to see the documentation that that's done. Okay, so the policy is your promise, but your files are your proof. Okay. Point 2, complete and organized files. When you sign up for one of my services, whether it be application service or a mentorship service, one of the first things that we do is we prepare those files, the employee files and the client files, because we want to have consistency throughout. So we're preparing, maybe 20 to 25 files the same way, so that when a client calls or you onboarding an employee, everything is the same. Okay, so in the client file, some of the things that are required, and it varies per state, some things that are required are the intake forms, the service agreement, the care plan or the service plan, and emergency contact info. And emergency contact info is things like who to call in case something happens, what's the nearest hospital that the client may want to go to, who's their doctor, and some other things that could be in the files is their medication, if the list of medications that they're on. So things like that, we get those files prepared consistent across the board. Okay, in the employee files, you have things like the application, you have the resume, the background check. Please do not forget to background check if it is required by your state. I'm pretty sure that all of the states require it, but specifically in Illinois, background checks are required. Make sure your training is in there. Caregivers need training, even though they are unlicensed professionals. They need to go through some type of training before they take on their first day as a caregiver, and make sure your evaluations are in there. Okay, missing paperwork is one of the fastest ways to get you fined, to get you cited, so make sure that's all together. Point number 3, we talk about proof of training and supervision. Again, we go back to the training. Surveyors want to see that your caregivers aren't just hired, but they're supported. We want to make sure we have orientation logs. Okay, everything has to be logged. Okay, so orientation logs, make sure that they completed orientation and that you have it documented that that person completed orientation. You don't want to get, because sometimes surveyors go out to the client's home and maybe interview them, and it could be on a day that the caregiver is actually caring for the client. So the surveyor will interview the client and they'll interview the employee, and you don't want to get in a situation where your employee says something like, well, I was never trained. I've heard it too many times where people would state, and this isn't just in home care, I've heard it too many times, they just threw me out here, they just threw me on the floor. So if that ever becomes a discrepancy, you will go back and say, oh no, she completed orientation on such and such day, and you're backed up. Okay, You want to make sure you have your in-service training. Every time something new occurs or something that you want to have the employees made aware of and you performed some type of training, have that documented. Again, it'll be your word against everybody else's. If you have a new let's just say you had a new discovery where I'm trying to think, what could I say? Maybe it was a new discovery on how to care for the clients, and it was a guideline that maybe your state just proposed that all home care agencies have to do, right? And you perform the in-service on that and say, hey guys, now we have to do this certain type of care this certain way, and you train them on what they're supposed to do. They sign off on the in-service training. And like I said, when it comes back to maybe the surveyor was out there and they're not performing that duty that the state now implemented, you have your log that says, hey, I gave an in-service on how we're supposed to handle this. He or she can't say that they didn't know about it, because here's their signature, they signed up. So documentation is of the utmost importance in healthcare, in any field in healthcare. I know this, y'all, from on the floor. I could have said I did something. I could have said I took Mrs. Jones' blood pressure. Where is it at? Mrs. Jones is in the hospital with a stroke. Where are the logs that you took that blood pressure? So again, if you don't remember nothing else that I said, if it's not documented, it's not done, okay? Make sure you have your supervisory notes. Make sure that whatever time frame that you decide for your agency, or not decide, but what is required by your state. So our state, Illinois, requires 90-day supervisory visits. So you have to make sure that on that 90th day, you have went and done your visits, okay? And that you've documented that the visits have been done, okay? Training is not optional. It's not optional. It's for your protection. Point number 4, surveyors look for patterns. One missing document might be a mistake. A pattern is a system failure. Again, we talk about those dates not lining up. You said that on June 1st you did this, but on the paperwork it says June 3rd. So which date is correct? So they look at things like that. It has to be consistent, okay? So make sure that all of your dates are lining up with, make sure they're lining up with each other. Don't have a date over here that says something else. Don't have a date over here that says something different. Make sure everything is cohesive, okay? Forms used sometimes, but not always. That's another discrepancy. You want to keep a system. We go back to those folders. If your folders are prepared correctly, the folders are prepared correctly from the beginning, everything that you put in there is just automatic. I do this form. We do these forms for this client. All of the forms are the same for every client, okay? And if there's any updates, we're inserting that new form into all of the folders. So that's important. Don't have a service agreement for one client and then the next client there's no service agreement. Like, make sure everything is consistent across the board, okay? And then policies are not updated, but policies are updated, but the files aren't, okay? So just like I said before, if you implementing a new policy and then it's not in there, just say if you add something like, maybe you add like a uniform policy and say, hey, everybody is required to wear black. You put that in your master policies, and then you don't have that in the caregiver's file, so they showing up to work in purple and all these different colors, which this is just an example. But if you updated your policy and you updated the files, there's no type of discord when that comes, okay? So point number 5, owner awareness, okay? This is big, because listen, when I tell y'all, when you come to me, I get a lot of inquiries on TikTok, and they say, hey, I want to start a home care agency, but I don't know what to do, or I don't know what it is. Guess what I do? I refer you back to whatever state you're in to at least go look up the policies, go read, go research, and do some information, because there are questions that when it comes time for survey that they're going to ask you. I'm not going to be there when they ask you. And that's my favorite line. I'm not going to be there to run your business. I can help you get started. I can help you get set up. I can help you be compliant and keep compliance, but I'm not going to be there. They asking you questions to see if you know what you're doing. They're not trying to trick you up. This is your baby. This is not just what kind of no, and this is no shade to anybody. This is not like a crochet business where you just needling and you just need yarn and you needling and there's really nothing else to it. This is a real business of taking care of people. People's lives are at stake and they're in your hands. So you have to know what you're doing. You have to know that some things like and this may be medical, but I'm gonna just throw that in there. You have to know that maybe Mrs. Jones' blood pressure is too low for her to possibly take that pill. That's probably medical, but I'm gonna just use that for example. It's like serious things that you need to know, that maybe her blood pressure is high, or let's use blood sugar. Maybe the blood sugar is low and Mrs. Jones needs a snack. She needs orange juice. You know, it's like serious business here. So it's just some things that you may need to know that are important for running your agency, okay? They may ask you things like, how do you onboard caregivers? And if you don't know that, they'll be like, well, like, what's going on here? You know, how do you onboard? How do you handle incidents? How do you monitor quality? Like, how do you determine whether your clients are happy? How do you determine whether your employees are happy? Like, what are your systems? Confidence comes from systems, not memory. We're not asking you to memorize how you do every single thing, but after you've done a few, you know how your agency flows, okay? So, a common myth I get is that they try to fail you for tiny mistakes. That's not true. They will fail you for your lack of structure. You don't have everything together. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to have some type of structure. You got to have some type of know-how and know about with your agency, okay? This positions you as rational and experienced, okay? So you, even though we might be new agency owners and we don't know everything, but just try to know the basics. Know the basics of your policies, know the basics of, like I said, how do you onboard caregivers? How do you handle incidents? And if you want hands-on help preparing for survey, I'll put a link down on how you could contact me or book a call with me. If you need help with licensure, I'll put a link down there where you can book a call. We can do a one-on-one. We can do a consultation call. I have so many resources down in this link, and subscribe for weekly guidance and so that compliance doesn't feel overwhelming. So until next time, guys, it was a pleasure. And as always, it's nothing. And until next time, guys, it was a pleasure. Talk to you soon.